All right, welcome back to the official CanyonChasers podcast, The Braking Zone. I'm Dave, journalist, motorcycle instructor guy, and
now off-road aficionado?
yeah, I have been trained by Dakar rally riders, so now I have off-road acumen as well.
Dakar. I'm Brian. I am engineer, road racer, been riding with Dave for years and years and years.
Right.
So today we just finished up the MotoGP race in Portimão. What did you think of Portimão's event?
Well, let's see. Portimão was the best sprint race in recent memory. It was exceptional.
Good race.
And then an incredibly boring race, which is Portimão is like one of those really great tracks. Like it would be an amazing track day. Like if that was your home track, I think that track would be a phenomenal track day track.
It might be the most up and down, like undulating track that they race at for sure. It looks like an absolute riot to just do a track down, like you said. I bet racing on it's tough, and we saw a couple guys struggle,
right?
With it. Yeah, the sprint was excellent. We saw a hell of a battle between Alex and Pedro Acosta. To the end, Pedro just fought and fought. I love getting to watch him in his element, which is fighting. But yeah, then the GP was kind of lackluster. It was, Bez got out front and just started pulling a gap and disappeared. Alex wormed his way by Pedro and pulled a safe gap and just managed it. They all kind of got close on the last lap. But it was more a matter of the riders managing the gaps, not because they were actually of any kind of risk of losing a spot.
And Pecco Bagnaia continued his perfect streak of bad luck.
His fall, because I watched his fall again. It's in a spot of the track where you're transitioning from left to right, kind of up over a crest. And on the backside of the crest, you have to start going to the brakes pretty quickly. And it's so easy to go to that front when it isn't quite loaded perfectly yet, or you're just a bit offline or a little abrupt with it. And that's basically what happens. As soon as you get on the backside, a little too much front tucks, and off he goes. It was so quick.
Because rewatching it, he didn't look like he was going especially fast, and it didn't look like he was at all abrupt. It was, it did look, I had the same kind of interpretation that it was over the crest of a hill. We were kind of,
It's a tough one. Highlights of the weekend was probably Sumcat Chantra's wheelie.
Yes, that was pretty spectacular. That was, yeah.
Probably not a highlight for him. Because
no, I think he probably needed to get a fresh set of leathers after that. Even he looked like that happened. Jack Miller doesn't seem capable of jumping the Yamaha to the same distance he was capable of jumping the KTM. I don't know what that says. Maybe it's a power weight issue. I don't know.
Somebody can tell us why that makes the
he can jump a KTM better than he can jump a Yamaha.
I think for me though, the most interesting part was getting to see how Nicola Bulaga transitioned to replace. So Nicola Bulaga came from World Superbike, and this weekend he was filling in for Marc Marquez. So he rode the GP25, the factory bike, this weekend. He was able to do a test ahead of time. So he got basically a day in. He was supposed to get 2 days, but they got rained out. But he got about a day in on the bike ahead of time. So call it 40 laps is all I think. But that's enough to make him feel a bit more comfortable. I thought it was fascinating to hear. He was the one who I was the most interested to hear interviews from. Because he's just going to get peppered with questions of, well, what's this versus this, and Pirelli versus Michelin, right? And all these things.
Yeah.
The only part he's been coached very, very well, so he doesn't say much. He knows better. The part I thought was really interesting was when he did talk about the tires. So World Superbike runs Pirelli, right, and has done for a long time. I would argue that the Ducati is probably the most Pirelli tire engineered bike in World Superbike. Right, because even the street Ducati Panigale you buy comes with Pirellis.
I don't think you can buy a Ducati without Pirellis.
Yeah,
I think
it's very.
And in fact, I don't know if that bike or that bike has. No, that one has Metzlers on it right now, which are Pirellis with an elephant as opposed to Pirellis with a P.
They're partnered somehow, right?
They're the same company. Oh, it's actually really. I don't know if it's still this way, but not to get too sidetracked on this. But I think it's really interesting, and it's why I think it's hard to not be a fan of Pirelli Metzler. They hired a super genius engineer years ago, and she was able to formulate rubber that does what no other tire has been able to do. Mm-hmm. But the structure inside of Pirelli Metzler, if it's still this way, I don't know. is that whoever makes the better tire gets rewarded with like a big bonus, and then you have to share your information with Metzler or vice
or vice
versa,
versa.
right? So it's like this really friendly competition where everybody gets the benefit of what's discovered. And I think even, I've probably run more Pirelli Metzlers over the years than any other brand. And some years the Metzler's a little bit better, and then the new one comes out and you go back to the Pirelli. So I'm always jumping back and forth between Metzler and Pirelli, and I'm always very happy with those tires. They and I think it's that little partnership that they have inside there. They makes them very competitive amongst each other.
Are because I've always assumed that the Pirelli was in that relationship. I've always assumed the Pirelli was more of the like sporting nature, and the Metzler's maybe more the touring, or maybe even like a lower price point version too. Because I don't hear about Metzler's at racetracks and stuff very
I know,
often.
which is unusual. It may be with the slicks, maybe that's what they do, but I can't remember what the Metzler version of like the Rosso 3 or the Rosso 4 are. Like the Rosso 3 wasn't super good. It was good. It's a good tire. It's what's on that thing right now. But the Metzler Rosso 3 equivalent
Hmm.
was better. It
Oh,
lasted a little
interesting.
longer and it gripped a little better. So I don't know how it goes when we go to the race thing. I think you're probably right. Pirelli is race exclusive, but the street tires, all the street tires, they're bouncing back and forth. For a long time, the Pirelli Sport Touring tire, the Angel GT or GT2 or whatever it was exceptional. Then they came out with a new one and it wasn't very good. And
Mm.
anybody who knew jumped to the Metzler Roadtech SC or whatever version was, which was actually the more linear improvement over the Angel GT. This
There's a
tire
listener
knowledge.
right now who's about to buy new tires, and they're furiously trying to write
Trying to
notes
keep
down,
track of what's
and
going
we're
on with
probably
it.
messing up the names of all these models anyway.
No, well, there might be newer models because it's, being fortunate enough to ride other people's motorcycles and wear out their tires. I put less thought and energy into tires than I
Fair,
used to when
fair.
I had to budget for them. I think in the scheme of things right now, since we're on this little side topic, is that you stick with the main brand tires. They're going to be an exceptional tire. They're going to be good. But there are some contextual differences that a lot of people may not really be aware of. And one of them, and you hear this all the time, that Michelin is bar none the best tire you can buy. And it is, but it isn't. Michelins tend to be really exceptional in cool, wet climates. Like if you live in the UK or you live in the Pacific Northwest, that's the correct statement. Those tires are incredible in those cool, wet climates, but they're not really good at dealing at really intense heat. They run at a lower operating temperature. They run a higher level of silica. So when you put them in a really hot, dry climate, like say Southern California or Utah,
Right.
they bake out really fast and get really hard, and they're not nearly as good as, say, a Pirelli or a Bridgestone in that situation, just because that tire is engineered for a different environment.
Mm.
So you're not going to get a bad tire or a good tire. It's getting the tire that's correct for your use case, your application, and your environment is such a big part of it.
Let, let's put a pin in it. I actually want to come back to the tire thing. We've
Okay.
gotten requests to talk about tires a little bit more.
Oh,
So
right
I
on.
want to
Okay.
have this conversation.
Okay.
Let's go back to Bulaga really quick.
Mhm.
So he's been on Pirellis for quite a while. He came from Moto2 a long time ago now, but well, 3 years ago or something, not that long, but he's been on the Pirellis for a bit and he's very much got them figured out, right? He's now on the Michelin, and his first, when they're interviewing him and asking him, hey, what is it like on the Michelin tires? He did not mention the brakes, which most of the time when someone jumps on a GP bike for the first time,
Carbon brakes.
it's the brakes.
Yeah.
And they're like, I feel like I'm going through the windshield everywhere. Like these things are out of this world.
Right.
He didn't mention that. I think he had a little time to acclimate. What he did talk about was with the way that this bike works with these tires, is all a function of the tire's design. I cannot brake the way I want to on the Pirelli, whereas on the Pirelli, you can be much more
Or
aggressive.
you mean on the Michelin? He can't brake the way he wants to on the Michelin?
Exactly, yeah. So the way he wants to brake from his Pirelli is he wants to go to the brakes and load the front tire very quickly, but very aggressively, and get a lot of braking done loading up the front tire. When he's talking about the Michelin, it's you have to be much more patient. You cannot load the front nearly as much as you want to without risk of losing the front, which I don't think that's shocking to anybody who's been following GP, because that's what we've watched them deal with Michelins for the last few years with all the downforce.
Right.
We know that front's not as good as the rear is, so they engineer the whole bike around the rear tire, and then they deal with the front tire. I thought it was fascinating, though, to hear him explain, I can't be as aggressive with this front end, braking on this tire as I can on the Pirelli. And that's crazy to me because these cheap GP bikes with all of this downforce, and for some context, I do not know how much downforce the GP25 makes. No, but well,
No,
Ducati does.
yeah,
We
Ducati,
don't know.
no one's
We're
gonna,
never
they're
gonna
not
get
going
to-
to share
yeah.
that information, right?
But I can tell you, when you look at the new KTM 990 RC, all it has is that little mustache wing, that little black wing on the front. And at 150 miles an hour, that thing supposedly makes 30 pounds of downforce.
Oh my gosh. That's more than I would have thought.
So you got to think that these GP bikes are making 50, 60 pounds of downforce at least on the
Which is
front end.
incredible.
Which, think about, just like if you just took a static bike and set 60 pounds on the triple tree, the triple crown on the top, think how much the fork would compress.
Yeah, you would watch the fork go down. You absolutely
Smash
would.
down,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 60 pounds.
So,
yeah.
I am throwing a number out there. I may be miles off. I'm just saying it should be significantly more than this little wing on this production bike.
It's interesting too, like talking his comment on how he wants to brake, because what he described is what we try to teach at Champ School, that, wait for the weight, the first 5%, once you get the first 5%, the weight transfers onto the front tire, then that's where you do your load. That's where you do the majority of your braking. You look at the brake graph and it'll be gentle, and we build this load, we mash the front tire kind of, and then we trail off that pressure to control what we're doing. So it's fascinating to me that the Michelin doesn't allow you to do that.
Yeah.
So that's got to be so hard for a rider to switch back and forth. Like, this is how you ride motorcycles. This is like kind of the textbook way of how you brake on a motorcycle, except for this tire. With this tire, you got to do it. Like, that's got to be hard to get your head around.
So I've been thinking about this ever since, because this interview was on Friday or Saturday, I think. So I've been thinking about this little interview for all weekend and trying to watch. And I think a big part of the difference is on the Pirellis, on the World Superbike stage, they are trail braking much harder and much deeper into the corner than they can on the Michelins right now. On the Michelins, and you can see them, like, they'll lift the rear tire sometimes in straight line braking, but you almost never see a current MotoGP bike initiating turn with the rear off the ground.
Sure, right.
That is commonplace. That's corner after corner in World Superbike.
Right.
That's so normal because the front will do it. They can't do that on the Michelins. They have to use the rear more as they initiate that turn in. Now, I'm sure somebody can find a snippet of someone doing it. I promise you that is
but
not
it's
the
not
norm.
common. It's
not
not
the norm.
no.
in GP.
We don't hardly ever see it. This makes me even more excited for them to be going to Pirelli for racing, because my personal riding, I'm guessing you're going to say the same thing, is I really ride with my front more than my rear. I'm thinking about my front tire much more than I'm thinking about my rear. Even to the point when I'm doing a lot of coaching, I'll run my rear tire kind of way too high in pressure to get more life out of it. Because, like, I can deal with that moving around or slipping and doing stuff like that. I don't want to deal with my front tire. I want to be able to, like, brake hard and build that pressure and have that faith in that front tire. Yeah, it's going to be really glad we're going away from those Michelins.
Yeah, I think it's just interesting how it just goes to show how much the bikes are engineered around the tires. Like, at the end of the day, that always matters more than the engine size, than, like, whatever the other rules are of the day. The tires are what decides how the racing works, how the bikes work, how they're designed. It's really the thing that everything's built around.
We did get a comment on the channel that was, they were criticizing the single tire rule. And I personally kind of prefer the single tire rule, because you remember the era when it was Michelin and Bridgestone going back and forth, and riders were constantly jockeying for the better tire. And it was kind of chaotic because Bridgestone back then even was known for a phenomenal front tire and a pretty middling rear tire.
Right.
And I thought it made for better racing. And that's when everybody was, Rossi included, we're all jumping ship from Michelin to get onto the Bridgestone. And it just, like, I think when you have a multi-tire rule, I want to hear your thoughts on this, but I think when you have a multi-tire rule, it makes it harder for the smaller teams because they may not be able to get the preferred tire, right? If you're Rossi, you can be like, I want this one, and they will move hell and high water to put you on the tire you want to be. But if you're somewhere in the middle, nah, we don't have the budget for that.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And so even though the single tire thing with Michelin's been frustrating, I think it's better to have a single tire.
So I could go two ways on this. Let me explain the context though. So let's say we went and moved to open tires. Anybody can run whatever tires you can get your
Right.
hands on.
I'm going to run the
Let's just
Continental this
say,
weekend,
right?
right? I'm going to run the.
That only works so long as there is effectively a tire marketplace set up where if you're Continental, if you're Pirelli, if you're Dunlop, if you're whoever, whatever tires you're willing to bring to GP, anybody and everybody, every team gets them. Same compounds, same sizes, same whatever. There isn't anything that is like, I made these for Dave only.
Well, Michelin was doing that. They had that 3D
Yep.
printer and they were printing special tires for Rossi.
And that I think is the problem when they have these open-ended non-spec tires where you can have different things, is then effectively the tire brands get to choose who has a chance of winning. And that's the part I don't like. So this is anecdotal. Do you remember one of my favorite races ever? Go back and watch 2006 Estoril.
Oh, yeah.
This is the race before Valencia when Nicky Hayden wins the championship because Rossi crashes out and blah, blah, blah. This race is better than that.
It was a good race. I remember that race.
So there's a bunch of drama with the Honda team that you can see in the race
Yeah, it was
if you want.
memes for years off of that one. Teamwork.
But the part that's really fascinating about it is Tony Elias wins the race, right? And he wins it by a whisker. And he was riding like he sold his soul to the devil that day because he was riding beyond any level he's ever shown before or since. He was out of his skin that day. Anecdotally, I don't know if this has ever been, I don't know whoever has said this, but I've heard it several times, is at that round, Michelin showed up with the special, like, make them on Friday, whatever, tires, Friday night and have them for Saturday, tires for Rossi. Rossi rode them Saturday morning and said, I don't like them. So Michelin's like, oh, okay, I guess use the old ones. And they handed them to Tony Elias. And so Elias got the special tires for Rossi that weekend. And then suddenly he could walk on water, you know?
Wow.
And now again, who knows if that's even true?
Right.
But it's a great story, but it speaks to the whole problem of when it was this open tire idea where, yeah, you can run Michelin's. Michelin's going to make tires that only Rossi gets, period.
Yeah.
You know? And that was unfortunate. So I'd say if we go to an open tire set of rules, it has to be sort of a marketplace situation where, you know, here's the 3 different versions of Michelin for this weekend. Here's the 3 different versions of Pirelli. Anybody can get whatever one they want. They can just pick them.
Right.
Right? Just to remove that thing. Now, the thing that would be interesting about the open-ended tires is because the reality is that isn't going to happen. No one's going to run Pirelli this weekend and Michelin next. And
right, because the bikes are built around them. You would have to test on
Never,
one.
yeah.
Even like you and I, when like you and
too
I have
much
been
work.
bouncing between Pirelli and Dunlop this last year. And you have to make adjustments. Like,
It's hard.
yeah, you have to make changes in how you interact.
Yep.
And that's at our level,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's like at that level, like I can't. It was like, no, we're going to run the Continental this weekend and next week. How would you know which tire to check or to choose until after you would want to test with it for the morning, and then like, oh, I want this one, right?
Yeah. So that's the problem. Like the marketplace doesn't mean you're going to see brands hopping tire. They're going to if they're Pirelli, they're Pirelli. If they're Dunlop, they're Dunlop. They're not switching. But what the interesting thing of it would be is you would watch bikes evolve differently.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
You might, remember when Bridgestone was here? Imagine if you had the current Michelin and the most current Bridgestone on display at the same time. You'd have wildly different racing going on.
Yeah, you would.
Because the Bridgestone was all about front end, and guys would carry the front end trail braking with the rear lofted in the air all the way to the apex. It was phenomenal.
I
to watch.
loved the front racing. Yeah.
But then they couldn't get out of the corners the same way.
Right.
And they would have crazy high sides and all these things. So you would see very different bikes being built and different races happening. The problem for the spectator is there inevitably winds up being on this track, the Bridgestones work better.
Yes.
And on this track, the Michelins work better. And so now when you should have 5 guys duking it out, should all be close, you have one guy tearing off at the front because he's on the right tires this round. and next round he's
Well,
not.
that's exactly what was going on when it was between Michelin and Bridgestone. It was like this track favors this, and you would also have this bike favors this versus that, and like it was just way too many variables. And again, I would argue that the rider ultimately suffered because if you ended up on a bad combination, your talents couldn't show through.
Right.
Your ability, and it's more than just being adaptable, right? I consider myself really adaptable, jumping from motorcycle to motorcycle, tire to tire. Like I feel like I'm pretty good at it.
Mhm.
But also I'm not riding anywhere near that
That
level,
level, yeah.
right? And so, okay, yeah, maybe Marquez would be phenomenal at adapting. He's shown he's very adaptable already. But maybe someone else who's super talented, like maybe like Bezzecchi, who has, I think, been the star of the last half of this season, maybe he wouldn't be as adaptable and we wouldn't get to see that talent. We wouldn't get to see that success from him.
Yep.
Right?
So I think ultimately as a fan, what you want, I don't care if it's Dunlops or Michelin's or Pirelli. I don't care who it is, frankly. What I want is a tire that has a wide range, like a wide operating window. So it works-ish everywhere, close enough, and allows for people to ride different ways. And that's the thing that I'm excited about Pirelli's, because it seems like watching World Superbike and other series that run Pirelli's, Moto2 now and these other ones, it seems to be, I don't know if it's more forgiving is the word, but it does seem to be a tire that more riders can wrap their heads around
Mhm.
and get the most out of for themselves. I also like that the Pirelli's tire degradation is a factor. And so you're watching guys trying to ride in a certain way to maintain a certain amount of grip.
I think that makes for great racing.
It makes for great racing.
Because it's strategy. I'm going to burn it up in the front to bugger off.
Yep.
And maybe get a gap early on, and then I'm going to milk the tire the rest of the way, or I'm going to save my tire for the last 3-lap battle.
Yep.
It's really, I think that makes for good strategy if a tire does have degradation.
Yeah,
over its life.
if the tires don't degrade at all, and they're as good on lap 30 as they were on lap 1, then the racing tends to not be as exciting because it's really, hey, that guy got these tires figured out this weekend, off he goes.
We haven't talked about it on this podcast at all, and I still don't know if I fully understand it. And this seems like the perfect time to ask the question. What's the deal with the front tire pressure thing? Like, why are they not allowing them to run lower pressures and to get we're dealing with a tire that doesn't work as well, but we're also not allowing them to run a pressure where they work better. And we saw the situation, I think it was last year, where Acosta had the cracked rim, so they let him get away with the lower tire pressure. I'm really curious your thoughts on this. Why, like, what's the deal with the front, even though, like, we're only one more year on Michelin?
Yeah. So on the front tire, so let me explain the tire really quick. What's weird about this thing? So think about your street tire or your track day tire. Think about the pressure that you normally run in the front.
Let's say 34 PSI.
Something like that, right? 30s usually is pretty normal.
34 to 36 is most street bikes.
The Michelin front tire. So now think about MotoGP. Now think about the forces that tire goes through, the downforce, all
We're
of
already
these
talking
things,
about like
right?
60 pounds potentially.
And you're thinking, oh, they must have to run a ton of pressure to keep the tire, to keep its shape, to not just collapse, right? Do you know what the minimum pressure is on the front tire in MotoGP?
I'm dying to know because I don't think I know this.
1.8 bar.
Right.
Which means nothing to us.
Right.
That's why I had to go look it up really quick.
Oh, you were looking it up.
Yeah.
That's what you were doing. 1.8 bar.
It is 26 pounds, 26.1
Oh my,
pounds.
that would be a flat tire on it. Like I've ridden on a 26 PSI front tire by accident and it was so squirmy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So now there's some other factors at play. Don't just think about your street tire at 26, because you run typically, if you're on a sport bike or 17-inch front wheel, it is probably a 3.5-inch front rim. That's the width of the bead to bead.
We're running a 120 width tire.
So you're running like a 120, maybe a 125 Pirelli. That's their thing, is the slightly wider front. The current MotoGP front tire is a 140.
Oh, I had no idea it was that wide.
Yep. Much, much wider.
Oh my gosh.
So now think about, we ride mountain bikes. Think about how mountain bike wheels have changed. How wide.
The wheels are getting wider and wider and wider.
The rim is wider, right?
That's what I meant. Like the rim is wider. Yeah.
Because now, what's your rim right now? Is it 30?
I think it's like Yeah, I think they might be 31s or
Something, right?
yeah,
30
but
something.
like it used to be like 26 or 24. It was like
I remember I had my previous bike had 23.5.
Yeah.
And that was like the hot thing at the time.
yeah, and I think it's
And now mine are 30. So what that's doing here, think about let me not knock a microphone over. If you think about the rim, if the rim is really narrow, the tire, even if you run a wide tire, the tire is pinched between the beads.
it's like a mushroom shape,
Right?
Right.
And so you have this rim here and this big pinched kind of tire shape. If I run a wider rim, now the tire can be bigger in diameter, but it's also spread across a wider. Effectively, think of standing with your feet side by side and somebody pushes you.
Well, it'd be less likely to fold and deflect as you're in corners and stuff like that. Because that was a problem with mountain bikes, right? That the tire would
fold
literally
over.
roll off of the rim if you threw it into a corner too fast with too low a pressure. It would just pop off the side.
So that's exactly what we're saying here. So they run a slightly wider rim and they run a wider tire, and so it's more stable. So you can run, because now what pressure do you run in your mountain bike?
Oh, I'm like 15 to 18
Right?
PSI. Yeah.
Probably under 20, right?
Yeah.
But back in the day, what were you running? 30 something on a mountain bike?
Yeah, like 28 to 30. Yeah. For
So
sure.
anyway, that's long answer, but that's the reason.
Really enlightening, actually.
Yeah, why they
So
can get away with these really low pressures on the front.
What's the problem with going below, though? Why are they being so critical
now
of that?
so that's the technical side. Now let's talk about why.
Okay.
Your Michelin. You have your stickers on every single bike. You have your stickers across the banners on the outsides of the racetrack. Everybody knows they're on Michelin tires. You paid a lot of money for that.
Oh, yeah,
for that
like,
privilege,
yeah.
right? Now you have a front tire fail on the racetrack. Oh man, do you not want Michelin badges anywhere?
Right.
Okay.
Even though, like, a fan might, well, we choose products based on who's in MotoGP.
Sure.
For sure. I guarantee you there's somebody who's watching right now or listening right now who runs Michelin tires because Michelin runs MotoGP.
Mhm.
Right. And so you don't want to see I don't want front tires fail. Even though that
The worst
tire
press.
is nothing at all like the tire you run on your motorcycle at home.
Right?
There's still that.
So,
I see.
So now the risk is, hey, we need to run these tires as low pressure as we can, because if they're too high pressure, then there's no feeling, there's no grip. I want as low pressure as I can. If I let you run now, because right now we say they have to run 26 PSI. If they went out on 22, I don't know if that's better. Maybe that's too far. But let's just say now what's happening is that tire's flexing so much and they're leaning and it's pulling on the sidewall. With all that heat and for how long the races are, all that flexing cyclically over and over, eventually the layers in the rubber can start to fail and come apart. It basically
delaminate.
pinches and starts coming apart. That is why there's a minimum, is because Michelin, yes, okay, there's a safety aspect. They don't want people getting hurt. But at the end of the day, Michelin cannot have a tire catastrophically fail on track.
Right.
That's bar none. That's why Michelin makes the rule. It's not Dorna. It's not MotoGP saying 1.8 is the minimum. It's Michelin saying 1.8 is the minimum. And if you go under, I forget what the rule is. I think it's something, somebody in the comments can clarify this, but I think it's 40% of the race. If you run...
Oh, that's right. There's like a percentage of the race you have to
Yeah.
go over, and you get like a 3 or 6 second penalty. But
It's big. It's like 18 seconds.
Oh, is it 18
It's
seconds?
huge.
Oh, yeah, that would
it's a
put you
big penalty.
yeah.
So if you have to run like 60% of the laps over, and they've got onboard pressure sensors the whole race. If they find that you're running under the pressure for too long of the race, then you get penalized. And I think there's stages of how painful the penalty is, but anyway, it's pretty painful. And we've watched a few guys lose podium spots because of it this
Right.
year.
We have. Yeah.
So that's the weird shtick with it, with the front tire. And so they're on the razor's edge of, I want it as low as I can get away with without breaking the rules in order to have the best performance and grip and so forth. And you've watched, earlier this year, I'm forgetting the race it was. We even talked about it. We watched Marquez, maybe it was Silverstone.
Oh, right. He fell back. He fell back to let the
in
tire
the middle
pressure,
of the corner.
the tire cool off.
No, it was the other way around. He was out front.
Oh, that's right. And he got behind to get more
Yep.
heat into the tire to get the
Yeah.
pressure to come back up.
Yeah, he was out front.
Yeah, and
the
we
tire
all
was-
watched it like, what's going on here? And we're like, I'll bet you it's a tire pressure thing.
And he tucked in behind, I think Alex,
I think so.
He tucked in behind Alex for a handful of laps. And Mark is Mark. And he may have something on his
No, they
dash.
all do. There was I think it was an Instagram post that showed every rider's tire pressure alert that
Well,
pops up on their on their
so I know
dashboard.
that they all have that. What I'm saying is he knew exactly how many laps he needed to follow Alex
60%.
before he could go again.
That's incredible.
That's Mark.
That guy.
Yeah.
That guy, seriously.
So anyway, that's the front. I want to talk one more bit about that because as we're telling this story about front tires, I remember when Michelin first came over for GP 2016, something like that.
Has it been that long, really?
It's somewhere in that. Maybe I might be off
10
a few
years,
but something
wow.
like that. The first few years, I think first 2 years when they were testing, the riders loved the rear. They've always loved the Michelin rear.
Oh, no,
Grips like
it's been, notoriously good.
I think it was Scott Redding, who's a bigger rider. He's not fat. He's just tall. He's taller than the rest of them. He puts more load on a rear tire, obviously. He had a tire blowout, a rear tire, on one of the tests.
I think I remember reading about this. Yeah.
And it was big news because, again, Michelin cannot have a tire fail. That is the worst press you could ask for. And immediately that compound or that carcass, whatever it was, gone. No one gets that one ever again. Now you go to the harder one. And then the riders complained appropriately that they don't get the good tire anymore because effectively it was too soft for Scott to ride. However Scott was riding, right? It failed, and that was, if it wasn't Scott, if it was somebody else, sorry Scott, but hopefully you're listening.
Hopefully you're listening. It's interesting that the concern is the delamination, because Michelin also is the only street tire I've seen delaminate, and it's typically running them in super high temperature situations. And it, like, back to the street thing we were talking about, that the Michelin, I think, it's outstanding in cooler climates. And going back to, is it just funny? Like, I've never seen any other tire actually delaminate on the street other than Michelin's, or like some of those weirdly
You might
off-brand
remember,
ones.
I don't remember the model name of it. It's the Michelin, it's not quite a touring tire, but it's like a sporty / touring tire. And it had almost like really thin sipes.
Oh, yeah.
At like a tapered angle on the rear. I remember watching one of those at a track day. It's probably an inappropriate tire for the track day.
No, right. It's a problem, right?
But the sipes were so they're just slits, right?
Yeah, they look
But
like rain grooves.
Chunks between the slits basically were tearing out.
Yeah, I remember this. Yeah. And it's so going back to the appropriate tire for what you're doing. A touring tire is designed to run at a much lower temperature, right? Because it's expected that you're going to wake up early in the morning, you're going to be riding up in the mountains, it's going to be cooler, you're going to see more rain. So they're designed to run when it's cooler. They're not designed for super hot conditions. And we see this all the time, and I'm not picking on Michelin, because we've seen it with Dunlops, we've seen it with Metzlers. You bring a touring tire to the street or to a track day, they bake out.
Yeah.
They get just so
hot.
They can't deal. They're not designed to deal with those levels of temperature, right? And we should also talk about outgassing really briefly. And outgassing is how a tire ages. Every time it gets hot and cools down, like, it outgasses. The chemicals come out of the rubber, and the rubber effectively gets harder. A touring tire is designed to deal with a ton of heat cycles, right? It's designed for you to get up and maybe ride to the Starbucks, and then maybe you ride in the canyon, you stop for lunch, and like each one of these are a heat cycle, right? And so the tire is just the whole chemical construction of the tire is wildly different than like our race tires.
Right.
We're running tire warmers on our track bikes. Yes, they need to be at a certain temperature for them to operate, but we're also limiting how many heat cycles that they go through, how many times they get hot and cool, even to the point at the end of the track day. Like, we do this all the time. We unplug the tire warmers and we let the tire warmer sit on the tire so it cools down really, really, really slowly. We pack up all of our gear, and the very last thing we do is we take the tire warmer off and put the bike in the trailer. Yeah.
And I was just going to say that exact example of you do have to think about these things like you're effectively heat treating the tire at all times. You are trying to allow it to cool down more slowly. Now, again, somebody may have done more research than I have on this. I've always done it because everyone's always done it. And the principle of it makes sense to me, is you're trying to let it come down slower.
Well, you can even think about metallurgy, right? Like, you take the hot sword and you put it in the cold bucket of water. It changes the makeup of versus letting it cool down slower. Rubber's, completely different thing than metal, but it's still going to be affected by heat. in some way.
It's funny you bring this up. So again, in a past life, when I did metal work, we would do heat treating for aircraft parts.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it was what you're saying. We would always refer to as baking cookies because you basically this part's this size, this thickness, this.
Oh, you had like a whole calculation on like makes
we had
perfect
books
sense.
and books, and you'd have to make a recipe essentially for what you're trying to achieve with. I want this to be T6 or blah blah blah. But how you quench the part is what you're referring to. So quenching is how you drop the temp down. So you either air quench it, you literally just let it cool down over time slowly, or you water or oil. There's different quenching methods, but they all have a different effect on the final result. Anyway, total tangent. We all do that with our tires at the track. I haven't got a clue if it makes a difference, but we all do it still.
Yeah, which is funny because our track day tire lasts maybe if I'm lucky, I get 3 days out of a rear. And that's typically me running it over temperature or over pressure, so it doesn't flex as much.
Yeah.
But a street tire, I'm very aware of it on a street tire because here's another interest. Okay. I do a lot of touring, but I don't run touring tires.
Yep.
I've found that the modern, not hyper sport, but the modern sport tire, like the Rosso 4, not the Rosso Corsa 4, but the Rosso 4, I get almost the exact same mileage out of it, but it has a pointier profile and a stickier compound. And so to me, it's like, why would I run a touring tire? Now, you got to keep in mind, I'm not running the weights. Like I'm not like on a Gold Wing where I have a ton of weight on the bike.
Never have a passenger.
Never have a passenger. And these things also affect the wear. But it's fascinating to me how much tires have improved. I think last podcast we talked about like feathering the tire, the bias ply tires. And now I look at like the sport tires that are on that Multistrada right behind you, how much grip it has, how quickly it comes up to temperature. It's fall right now. I took it for a quick little ride on Friday to do a little thing. How quickly the tire warmed up. It blew me away. Like, I'm like, holy cow, this is a cold day. The tire's gripping just fine. And then to me, like, you shouldn't change tires more often than you change oil on a street bike. So if I can get 3,000 miles out of a rear tire on a street bike, I'm happy. I don't need a 10,000 mile tire. I don't like. You're giving up so much in grip and feel and for how I ride. And again, like everybody rides, like choose what works for you.
Suits you. Yeah.
But it's just incredible to me that I can put a sport tire on, ride that thing to California, ride up the coast, come back, and the tire survives the whole trip.
Yep.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit. So you just said if I can get 3,000 miles out of a tire, perfect. I'm happy with that. I think part of the problem is people coming from cars.
Yeah, I want a 50,000 mile tire.
How long can I go before I have to change this?
Yeah,
right?
well, and even in my car tires, like I'm doing the same thing. Like we're kind of corking on Michelin a little bit, but I put Michelin car tires on a lot of vehicles because they're awesome.
Well, and we should clarify we're not sponsored. Like we're not bashing.
None of us get tire money. Yeah, like
but the difference. Like these are all anecdotal, right?
Yes.
You've seen these happen before. It's not like you're.
I'm not a scientist. I'm not like you're just getting my observations.
But anyway, my point was, I think some people come into bikes with sort of a car mentality, and in my mind, that's incorrect, right? You don't. If you wanted to eke out as many miles to get to California, you would take the car, right? Yeah. Drive the car.
Well, and I've been criticized more than once because I've done it more than once. I'll put the bike on a trailer, drive it across Nevada, unload it, ride all the really good technical challenging roads where the grip really matters, right?
Yeah.
Rather than burn up half of a tire just crossing Nevada.
Right.
And again, like if you like that kind of riding, far be it from me to criticize that, but
it's not your thing.
And it's also context, right? You got to look at what's important to you and make decisions that fill your need, right? You can get the Dunlops they run on the Gold Wings. It's, Wright's Motorcycle here in town. Great shop. They've taken care of us for years. The owner of that shop, he just bought a new Gold Wing and he runs, that guy has a wealth of knowledge on tires. That guy's amazing. But he was talking to me about the Dunlops they run on the Gold Wings and the mileage they get out of those things. It is like car mileage,
right?
On a motorcycle that weighs as much as a car, but still leans to change direction.
Right.
It's incredible tire technology. We're living in like this incredible era.
Yeah.
of tire technology on motorcycles.
I think the one more I want to kind of dive down on one more rabbit hole with the tires here. I didn't know this was going to turn into the tire
No, I had
episode,
no idea. Like
but
it
here we
was
are.
just, yeah, we're yeah.
Um, none of these brands, these big brands that we're talking about, your Dunlop, Michelin, Bridgestone, Pirelli, Metzler, Continental. Yeah.
Continental's a
Continental?
massive company,
Yeah, yeah.
but their tires just aren't as. And I've done work with Continental. They've flown me down to their test facility to test tires in Uvalde, Texas. They have a big giant oval. They have a MotoGP. They call it their F1 track.
Mhm.
They have a little teeny janky track. Like unbelievable. Like riding on the. Yeah, it was. But nobody thinks about Continental. Their tires are better than most people realize.
My point is, if you kind of stick within that brand, and if I'm forgetting one, I'm sorry, wasn't intentional. They don't make bad tires.
Right.
None of their tires are bad tires.
I agree.
Yeah. It's just, again, it's what is your goal and what is the tire that fits your purpose? Go with that one, right?
Yeah.
Now, there are some differences in how these brands make tires almost like philosophically.
I agree. Yeah.
There are certain characteristics that a Dunlop is going to have kind of throughout the line of Dunlop tires. And they're going to be like, one to one, they're going to be a little different than the Pirellis, than the Michelins, than the whatever.
Yeah,
right?
broad brush. Pirellis are known for a really soft carcass. They run a 0-degree belt. They're not
Yep.
known to be kind of gooey and pliable.
Yeah.
Bridgestones are known to run a stiffer carcass. Like
Yep.
I've ridden them all. There's pros and cons for both things, right?
My context of these is because I haven't, from the track anyway, I race on Dunlop tires, and I've raced on Pirellis for over a decade prior to that. And so it's this transition of going to a totally different tire. And that's the part that was the most like wrap my head around it is no matter what I do, this is going to feel different. I'm never going to get that Dunlop front to feel like the Pirelli front or whatever, vice versa. There's certain characteristics of how they think about tires and how they want to build them that it's just intrinsic to their tires. So the Dunlops always come across to me as a stiffer carcass, a grippier rubber, a grippy rubber, I should say, for the given, hard, medium, soft kind of thing. But they're really kind of an endurance tire. That's more of their background. That's how it feels anyway, is because from the first lap of the race to nearly the end of the race, there is a drop in performance, but it's really minor on the
Right.
Dunlops. They really are very consistent. And we've seen this bear out in Moto2, in Moto America, and these other series. The difference in lap times has much more to do with the fuel load than with the tire, wear, right, on the Dunlops. The Pirellis are almost the other way around. They're phenomenal from the beginning, but they're much softer and squishier in general. So they have a lot of feedback, a lot of
feel,
communication.
right? Sometimes more feel than I necessarily want.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And when we were both running Pirellis at the same time, we would run the front tire a few pounds higher because neither of us liked how much it deformed under hard braking into a corner.
Yeah, and to adjust, you can again you can deal with pressures and stuff to get.
And then they
different
came
feel
out with the 125, which was I thought a huge step forward for the Pirelli front tire because it seemed to solve a lot of that deformation under heavy load.
Yeah,
right.
And you could get away with a 32, 30 psi front end,
Which is crazy
low, but that would work.
Yeah,
but they had a lot of feedback and a lot of feel, but then they would drop off more quickly. It felt like to me in a race. Michelin's big thing always to me seemed like they always had this very pointy V,
really pointy front tire
profile.
Yeah, Dunlop always seemed to kind of split the difference. Pirellis are like really around.
Yep,
like that's their 0-degree belt thing. It's always been that it's really this very gentle tip in. The Michelin's always felt like they fell into the corner and they wanted to be on the side.
Yep.
These modern Dunlops that you and I are running now, I really like the feel of the front tire because it seems to split the difference. That it doesn't tip in quite like the Michelin sometimes almost felt unstable in situations. Like it wanted to be on the side of the tire so bad that it just where the Dunlop also you get like it's a quicker tip in, but I also feel like I have more edge grip on the front tire because I feel like there's probably a bigger contact patch. Not as big as like Michelin's contact patch when you're on the side of the tire, right? So you're always like gauging these. And all right, I'm gonna derail you a little bit here because I get this question all the time, and I really want to hear your thoughts on it. And I did a whole video on this, and it's one of the number one questions we get on the main channel, and that's feel? How do I feel this? We're talking about what we're feeling from the front tire,
Mhm.
right? How do you feel? Give me your thoughts on how you feel what a tire's telling you.
That's a good one. So it is to develop feel. It does take a lot of practice, I will say. The more you can practice in places where grip is lower. So the reason why, I guess, my advice to people to develop feel. I'll explain kind of what I think about when I'm feeling the tire in the first place. But the way to develop feel, I think, is you have to put yourself kind of at the limit of the grip more often. And now you could go do that on the street. It's quite dangerous and there's consequences, so I don't recommend it.
Very high
You
consequences.
can do it on the track. It's a bit safer. There's still pretty big consequences. Or you could do it in a place where your speeds are slower, the grip is lower by far, and if you do fall over, the consequences are usually much less because of the speed and so forth, and that's riding in the dirt.
I couldn't, yeah,
The
absolutely. You got to ride in a low grip
and
environment.
you don't have to go get a 450 motocross bike to figure this out. In fact, I'd say that's the wrong way to go. Motocross tracks, there's lots of banking, lots of ruts. That's not what you want if you're trying to develop feel for grip. What you want is like the little TTR 230 or 125 and a basically flat piece of dirt with no berms, no support of any kind. And you want to just try to ride around and feel the front brake and the front giving up grip and losing and sliding a little bit, and then being able to let back off the brake pressure to have it come back. Same thing with the rear. You want to feel the rear step out, and then how can your body positioning and stuff adjust that and give you grip again? That's why when you see a lot of these guys who go training the motocross or the MotoGP guys do this, like Rossi's got that crazy ranch out in Tavuli or whatever they call
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
It's a bunch of kids, right? These racers on 450s with dirt track tires sliding all over the place training. That's training for them, right? So that's the kind of stuff I think if you really are serious about getting better at this, it's try to find a way to safely practice in a low grip environment and minimize your consequences. And the way you do that is with something cheaper and smaller typically. And I know there's people saying like, "Well, that sounds great for you. You guys live in Utah and you race at the racetrack, blah blah blah. You can just go buy another bike if you want." You could go find a cheap used little 120 like TTR 125 or 230, whatever it is. Go find some dirt somewhere and go slide around a couple of times a year. And if you buy that thing used and you keep it clean enough, you can sell it in a few years for what you bought it for. I
Absolutely.
mean,
Right.
it is absolutely worth its weight in gold if you can just get that under your belt because you'll develop a feel very quickly, surprisingly quickly with it. If you can just put in the time, it'll make everything easier, I promise.
What's amazing about that too, because I'm a huge advocate of the exact same thing, is how quickly your body learns to respond to a slip and how to regain it. And then as soon as you end up back in an asphalt situation, you know what a slip feels
Yep.
like. And so your muscle memory like kicks in almost immediately. And I've been able to recover from things that like might freak out someone who hadn't taken the time to learn this. And you're like, oh, just do put my body like this and put weight here, and the rear's gonna bite again.
Yep.
Like even simple stuff like if I put my weight forward over the handlebars, I lose grip on the rear. If I put my weight back, I can brake harder. So like it
Mhm.
loads the rear so it's not force. It's you learn this stuff so
Yep.
fast and it absolutely 100% translates
Yep.
in a very remarkable way. And you're like, holy cow, you feel like a superhero
Yeah.
when you spend time.
And
What does it feel like? What is it? It helps you understand where the threshold is.
and that's why I like going and doing this stuff in a very now there's schools that do this if you want. I know there's Colorado has a I forget the name of them right now, but they've got a school that does it. There's a couple of these ones where it's basically a bunch of little dirt bikes set up in like a fairground tent. Effectively, it's all it is. It's not complicated. They're great. You don't need that though. Frankly, just if you get one and get a couple of buddies or whatever and go out and do this, you will learn a ton, I promise. It's totally worth doing if you can, make the time for it. Okay, that's how I would suggest you learn finding feel. But what does it actually feel like? So to me on the track, what I want is I want to feel the tire. So this is an analogy. This is how I mentally think about this. This isn't what I'm doing literally, but it's how I think about it. I want to feel the tire squishing down, deforming, and squishing into the ground, and really feel the push back through the bars of the tire as it's going over ripples and divots and bumps and so forth. I want to feel all of that. If I'm too light on the brakes, so where I'm talking about is turning into a corner. So I'm braking on the front end and now I'm starting to tip into a corner. If I'm not feeling the tire pushing back, if I brake too much and I'm coasting into the corner without any brake pressure on, I have zero feel.
Right.
I'm just steering into the
It's
corner.
really unnerving.
Yeah.
It's really, really unnerving.
It does not feel good to have no load on the front end. And that's almost like this mental hurdle that new track riders have to get over is if you go down the front straight and you're turning into the first corner and you do all your braking and then you get off the brakes and then you turn in, you're just kind of like skating and surfing on the very top surface of the tire, of the front tire. It is, and it's going to feel terrible. It's going to feel wishy-washy and you're not really going to know what it's doing. It just kind of is out there. If you can go to the brakes, go into that first corner and keep a little bit of brake pressure on, and we're talking minuscule amounts, but just enough to keep some weight on the front tire, you're going to get so much more communication and information from the front tire because it's being pushed into the ground more, that you're going to have instantly more understanding of what's happening, what it's doing. And when you're doing that, if you've got a little bit of weight on that front end as you're starting to come into the corner, if it has a little slide, you're going to feel the difference in pressure you're feeling through the bars because the front all of a sudden
Starts
slips.
to turn really easy. Like it
Yeah.
almost feels like it's turning
It gets
in.
light.
Yeah, really
Yeah.
light. It's crazy feeling.
And you'll get just this little, and it'll be a hint. It won't be like like snap. It'll be like like just a hint of, that might be the limit. Any more here at this, spot on the track is too much. But you've got to have some load on it. Otherwise you're never going to get that information from it. But that's what I'm looking for. Like when I go to the brakes, the difference between a really fresh race tire and a very used race to the front tire is the really fresh one. Man, it feels like when I go to the brakes and I tip in, it feels like it's Velcroed.
Right. It's sticky. You can feel how
Yeah.
sticky it is. It'll do everything you ask of it.
Every little input, and there is more. It's almost more not violence the word, but I'm getting more direct feedback. Whereas as the tire gets older and more worn, it's like smearing.
Oh, that's a
almost.
really great way to describe it. That's elegantly said.
Yeah,
Brian.
because you get it like the little divots and stuff that before were kind of like snapping and pushing because the tire's so grippy. Now it's kind of going like gliding across them, and you get kind of a softer, drifting almost kind of a feel to it. But that's what I'm looking for. Is I want to know. I want to feel every little nook and cranny that the tire's rolling over as I'm coming into a corner. That's the feeling I'm picturing in my mind.
So there's another element of this that I think we need to touch on, and that's how you're holding onto the handlebar, right? And there's some people who advocate you should have no weight on the handlebars ever, and even under braking, you just squeeze the tank with your knees so you can have no weight on your handlebars. I disagree, quite honestly. I think you need to have some weight in your handlebars. I mean, you don't want to be death gripping it, but even in the corner, like I want my arms loose, but I still want to have contact with the handlebars so I can identify the information. If I'm super light on the handlebars, I'm going to miss stuff.
Yep.
Right? I need to have some level of grip, not death grip, but it's again finding this like little threshold of like what is the right amount of pressure on the handlebars,
Mhm.
right? And it's why or how your body is put together, the way your muscles and your arm work. And I know some very fast riders don't ride this way, but you're better off holding onto the handlebar with your ring and
These
pinky
two-
fingers. Like that's where your strength comes from because it's actually attached to the big muscle in your forearm, where your pointer and ring finger are really more precision fingers. They have more feel. Right. So I want to be holding on with those two fingers, but like one or two finger are usually out over a lever or I'm getting ready to. I'm not always covering the brake on the track,
Right.
but I am like under braking or as I'm trail braking in, I'm still holding on to the handlebar in a relatively real way
Mhm.
so I can feel what's going on.
Yep.
I'm not trying to be ultra light on the handlebars all the time.
So I think it's, I think we've gone a whole podcast so far and you've not said it depends, Dave.
I haven't said it depends, but it depends. Everything depends.
But I would say this one, it does depend.
It does depend, yeah.
Especially in the context of what you're doing or where you are.
100%.
Right? If you're on the street and you're like, I gotta lock my arms before I brake for this corner.
You shouldn't be breaking that hard on the street. Yeah,
don't be back off a little. Like.
Bring it down. Bring it down.
But when you're at a track in a controlled, safer space, and that's where you go if you want to push and you want to try to push faster, right? That's where you do it. If you are able to go into a really hard straight line braking zone and you have no weight on your hands, I would argue that you are probably not braking as hard as you can.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, someone might say, oh, well, you should have light hands on the track too. Sure. But your goal must not be to go as fast as you possibly can, because that is not braking very hard.
Right.
Right. I don't know anybody who can, and I run all kinds of grips on my tank. I've 3D printed different tank shapes before for myself. I've done all kinds of stuff. I promise you, when I'm braking really hard, there is weight on my hands.
There has to be, but it's also how the weight comes in. You don't want you want the weight to kind of be directly going into the bones, like on your palm of your hand, on the palm, like at the heel of your hand, even.
Yep.
So that the pressure is going right into the bones and the muscles, so everything's stronger. Whereas if it's up too high, you're going to get wrist flex, or if it's too low, your hand could go over the top of it. So there's a technique to it, but yeah, and think about it, even on the street, how many times on the street did you have to maybe brake harder than you were planning because something unexpected happened? And I want my hands and arms and fingers all in the appropriate place so that I'm prepared to adjust to whatever variable that just came up in front of me.
Yeah. So for sure, you're going to have load in your hands when you're braking. It's funny as you're talking about this. I don't think we've talked about this in the podcast ever. This goes to a point that it's usually one of the first things that I talk to with a newer track rider at the track is if they're struggling with, I'm not comfortable, I don't feel good braking, list of reasons, is if we go look at their bike and they think, oh, I don't think I'm quite sitting where I should. Your bars, if they're clip-ons, right? If there's a handlebar, the tube is shaped the way that it is, you could still roll it forward and back, and that can make a big difference.
You can go to a dirt bike shop, and there's probably 50 different handlebar bends you could choose from.
Bars are not expensive, guys. It is not as big a deal.
It's crazy how customizable you can get. Because everyone has a different wrist angle to this point, right? Like, I think you run your handlebars in.
No, I run mine super
you run yours
flat.
way out. I run mine in further because my wrist angle, it hurts to run them way out.
Yep.
But like biomechanics, this is a factor.
Yeah, no, we've a friend of ours, Jerry, who's significantly taller than me. He races with me. He will run his bars in a position that I feel like a child on his bike because they're so far forward. So there is like a too much. It's not just like always go flatter and wider, right? There's a limit. And like you're saying, like everyone's built a little different. But I find a lot of times if your bars are, and if this is making sense, think about holding the bars and sweeping them in. If you like, my elbows come in naturally when I do that.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm trying to like push from this angle. I am much more in control if I've got not totally wide, but a more flared out elbow, just so I've got a little more leverage on the bar. That can also make the biggest difference in your feel of the front end. And I've ran into this a ton of times with people where just by rotating the bars wider a couple of degrees, not a ton, a little bit, suddenly they feel better on braking, they feel better on turning, they can feel what the front end's doing more because they're not like this jammed up.
Yeah, I think most people run them in too tight, if I'm being honest with you. And you can actually do a little test at home. Like find the width of your handlebars or whatever, on your clip-ons or whatever. And if you put your hands on the table in front of you at roughly that width, you can measure the sweep of your angle where your knuckles are, where your hand's going to be the most comfortable in that position.
Oh, interesting.
So like everyone's wrist shape is different, right? And it's like we do this with like I know for a fact that my wrists are weird and I have to run more sweep than most people, more sweep than I would honestly like to, but it hurts to be out too far. It's painful.
Yeah.
When I did the Grom race with Honda, those Groms, the clip-ons were almost arrow straight. My wrists hurt so bad. I was in like agony because it was too far out. Everyone else thought they were awesome. And I'm like, I can't, this is really but you can find out. You can figure out where because when your body is in kind of this neutral ergonomic position, you're going to have more strength naturally
Yep.
because everything's in the position where it's designed to work.
Now, you could do a little quick search on YouTube because if now you're curious, geez, are my bars in the wrong spot? Have they been in the wrong spot this whole time?
Right.
There's probably about 5 different tests that people say you can do to figure out where should they be.
Like
to
push-up test is
experiment.
the one I've always
Yeah,
used.
I've seen a bunch of different ones. I'm not saying any of them are right or wrong, but just find something that works for you and just don't be afraid to experiment.
Right, play with it. Absolutely, right? It's, mountain bikes for me, that was where the push-up test, because everyone's like, "Oh, like I'm not a very big guy, but I run a wider bar
Mhm.
for whatever reason. I just find it's so much more comfortable to run a wider bar with a little bit more sweep."
Yep.
Right? And then you can pick. Same thing with like if you have a street bike that has tube bars, any dirt bike shop, like Pro Taper is the company that comes to mind. They'll have like this display of 50
Yeah.
different Pro Taper bars,
Yep.
all with a different angle. One will be like some of them are named after famous racers, and you can find the bar angle that works for you, and it's awesome to have that flexibility. A clip on, most of them, they clip onto the top triple clamps on a sport bike. They're pinned from the factory.
Yep.
They usually have pins that limit how much they can rotate. You can either cut the pins off, or you can get aftermarket clip-ons and rotate them to whatever angle works for you. It's a big deal. It makes a difference.
Yep. Now, I will say if you are running stock ones, you can cut the pin off, like Dave's saying, but then just be mindful because there's usually those stock clip-ons have a single bolt.
Right, to hold them on. Yeah, it's true.
Just be careful that you don't like put yourself into a bad spot with
Well,
them.
and ironically, this is a funny little thing. I bought when I was building my Aprilia RSV4, I bought the clip-ons 0-degree clip-ons that everybody swore
Oh,
by.
yeah.
I put them on, and again, they hurt my wrist like crazy. And you're like, I gave them to you. You gave me your OEM
The street
clip-ons,
ones, yeah.
so I still have the pins. Whatever.
Happy
Where
as can
Aprilia,
be.
I'm totally.
Yeah.
They're exactly where I want them.
What Dave's talking about with the 0-degree ones is now we're getting way on the weeds here. If you look at a clip-on, typically the clip-on clips onto the forked tube, like this, and then the bar is mounted usually in front of it and it sweeps back. The 0 degrees, the way the bar mounts is actually kind of in line. It's almost like it's coming off tangent from the fork tube itself. So what it does is effectively just sweeps the bars back towards you slightly and gives you a lot of times more clearance from fairings and gas tanks and stuff. That's the main difference. I run 0-degree ones. I like them better.
Yeah, most people like them better. Yeah, but again, just because the majority does a thing, I mean, this is getting a little philosophical, but riding well is not a majority rules thing, right? Just because the majority of people do something one way doesn't necessarily make it the best method. If we look at the best riders in the world, they're almost outliers in a certain degree because they're not doing what the majority is doing, right? And we're talking like big bell curve, the whole population, not the entire racing community, right? So you have to be willing to kind of step out from like, well, everybody on the internet says I should do this. Maybe.
Yeah.
But there's a high probability that maybe not, right? That maybe everybody says that because that's just what's been repeated time and time again. Dad told him because grandpa told him, you know what I mean? And it just trickles through and like nobody really questions it.
Yep. I did not realize we were going to get into handlebars today, but that was
I know,
fun.
or tires. Like this was just kind of it's kind of the fun of just letting the conversation go where it goes.
Anything else we got to go over today?
No, I thought that was a really fun episode. Again, let us know. Like, if you have questions, we read the comments. We're in there.
Yep.
Let us know. I think we mentioned a couple of you guys' questions already today, and hopefully you were listening to this episode and you got to hear us answer your question. But yeah, great
Sounds good.
episode.
See you next week.
All right, we'll see you next time.